Suppose we get her ready in a couple of days. Probably Ted ought to come down from the university just in case anything happened." Dr. Dilling growled, "Nope. If you don't want peritonitis to set in, we have got to operate right away. I must advise it strongly. If you say go ahead, I'll phone for the St. Mary's ambulance at once, and we'll have her on the table in 3/4 of an hour." Of course, I suppose you know what, but great God, man, I can't get her clothes ready and everything in 2 seconds, you know, and in her state, so wrought up and weak." "Just throw her hairbrush and comb and toothbrush in a bag. That's all she'll need for a day or two," said Dr. Dilling, and went to the telephone. Babbitt galloped desperately upstairs. He sent the frightened Tinka out of the room. He said gaily to his wife, "Well, the doc thinks maybe we better have a little operation and get it over. Just take a few minutes, not half as serious as a confinement, and you'll be all right in a jiffy." She gripped his hand till the fingers ached. She said patiently, like a coward child, "I'm afraid to go into the dark all alone." Maturity was wiped from her eyes. They were pleading and terrified. "Will you stay with me? Darling, you don't have to go to the office now, do you? Could you just go down to the hospital with me? Could you come see me this evening, if everything's all right? You won't have to go out this evening, will you?" He was on his knees by the bed. While she feebly ruffled his hair, he sobbed. He kissed the lawn of her sleeve and swore, "Oh, honey, I love you more than anything in the world. I've kind of been worried by business and everything, but that's all over now, and I'm back again." "Are you really, Georgie? I was thinking, lying here, maybe it would be a good thing if I just went. I was wondering if anybody really needed me or wanted me. I was wondering what was the use of my living. I've been getting so stupid and ugly." "Why, you old humbug, fishing for compliments when I ought to be packing your bag. Me, sure. I'm young and handsome and a regular village cut-up, and—" He could not go on. He sobbed again, and in muttered incoherencies they found each other. As he packed, his brain was curiously clear and swift. He'd have no more wild evenings, he realized. He admitted that he would regret them. A little grimly he perceived that this had been his last aspiring fling, before the paralyzed contentment of middle age. Well, and he grinned impishly, it was one doggone good party while it lasted. And how much was the operation going to cost? I ought to have fought that out with Dilling, but no, damn it, I don't care how much it cost. The motor ambulance was at the door. Even in his grief, the Babbitt who admired all technical excellences was interested in the kindly skill with which the attendants slid Mrs. Babbitt upon a stretcher and carried her downstairs. The ambulance was a huge, suave, varnished white thing. Mrs. Babbitt moaned, "It frightens me. It's just like a hearse. Just like being put in a hearse. I want you to stay with me." "I'll be right up front with the driver," Babbitt promised. "Oh, I want you to stay inside with me." To the attendants, "Can't he be inside?" "Sure, ma'am, you bet. There's a fine little camp stool in there," the older attendant said with professional pride. He sat beside her in the traveling cabin with its cot, its stool, its active little electric radiator, and its quite unexplained calendar displaying a girl eating cherries and the name of an enterprising grocer. But as he flung out his hand in hopeless cheerfulness, it touched the radiator, and he squealed, "Oh, Jesus!" "Why, George Babbitt, I won't have you cursing and swearing and blaspheming." "I know, awful sorry, but gosh, all fish hooks! Look how I burned my hand. Gee whiz, it hurts. It hurts like mischief. Why, that damn radiator is it's hotter'n the hinges of Hades. Look, you can see the mark." So, as they drove up to St. Mary's Hospital, with the nurses already laying out the instruments for an operation to save her life, it was she who consoled him and kissed the place to make it well. And though he tried to be gruff and mature, he yielded to her and was glad to be babied. The ambulance whirled under the hooded carriage entrance of the hospital, and instantly he was reduced to a zero. in the nightmare succession of cork-floored halls, endless doors open, an old woman sitting up in a bed, an elevator, an anesthetizing room, a young interne contemptuous of husbands. He was permitted to kiss his wife. He saw a thin, dark nurse fit the cone over her mouth and nose. He stiffened at a sweet and treacherous odor. Then he was driven out, and on a high stool in a laboratory he sat dazed, longing to see her once again, to insist that he had always loved her, had never for a second loved anybody else or looked at anybody else. In the laboratory he was conscious only of a decayed object preserved in a bottle of yellowing alcohol. It made him very sick, but he could not take his eyes from it. He was more aware of it than of waiting. His mind floated in abeyance, coming back always to that horrible bottle. To escape it he opened the door to the right, hoping to find a sane and businesslike office. He realized that he was looking into the operating room. In one glance he took in Dr. Dilling, strange in white gown and bandaged head, bending over the steel table with its screws and wheels, then nurses holding basins and cotton sponges, and the swathed thing, just a lifeless chin and a mound of white in the midst of which was a square of sallow flesh with a gash a little bloody on the edges, protruding from the gash a cluster of forceps like clinging parasites. He shut the door with haste. It may be that his frightened repentance of the night and morning had not eaten in, but this dehumanizing interment of her, who had been so pathetically human, shook him utterly, and as he crouched again on the high stool in the laboratory he swore faith to his wife, to Zenith, to business efficiency, to the Boosters Club, to every faith of the clan of good fellows. Then a nurse was soothing, "All over. Perfect success. She'll come out fine. She'll be out from under anesthetic soon, and you can see her." He found her on a curious tilted bed, her face an unwholesome yellow, but her purple lips moving slightly. Then only did he really believe that she was alive. She was muttering. He bent and heard her sighing, "Hard to get real maple syrup for pancakes." He laughed inexhaustibly. He beamed on the nurse and proudly confided, "Think of her talking about maple syrup! By golly, I'm going to go and order 100 gallons of it, right from Vermont." 2. She was out of the hospital in 17 days. He went to see her each afternoon, and in their long talks they drifted back to intimacy. Once he hit on something of his relations to Tanis and the Bunch, and she was inflated by the view that a wicked woman had captivated her poor George. If once he had doubted his neighbors and the supreme charm of the good fellows, he was convinced now. "You didn't," he noted, "see Seneca Doane coming around with any flowers or dropping in to chat with the missus." But Mrs. Howard Littlefield brought to the hospital her priceless wine jelly, flavored with real wine. Orville Jones spent hours in picking out the kind of novels Mrs. Babbitt liked, nice love stories about New York millionaires and Wyoming cowpunchers. Louetta Swanson knitted a pink bed jacket. Sidney Finkelstein and his merry brown-eyed flapper of a wife selected the prettiest nightgown in all the stock of Parcher and Stein. All his friends ceased whispering about him, suspecting him. At the athletic club they asked after her daily. Club members whose names he did not know stopped him to inquire, "How's your good lady getting on?" Babbitt felt that he was swinging from bleak uplands down into the rich warm air of a valley, pleasant with cottages. One noon Vergil Gunch suggested, "You planning to go to the hospital about 6? The wife and I thought we'd drop in." They did drop in. Gunch was so humorous that Mrs. Babbitt said he must stop making her laugh, because, honestly, it was hurting her incision. As they passed down the hall, Gunch demanded amiably, "George, old scout, you were sore-headed about something here a while back. I don't know why, and it's none of my business, but you seem to be feeling all hunky-dory again, and why don't you come join us in the Good Citizens League, old man? We have some corking times together, and we need your advice." Then did Babbitt, almost tearful with joy at being